Hello. All right, well, welcome. I'm still going to wait a few more minutes to see if anyone hops on, but I know many of you said that you actually would not be able to join live and that you'd be listening to the recording, so that's perfectly fine. I hope you're all having a good Thursday wherever you may be. And just a quick introduction. My name is Anna Kaufman. I'm a nutrition therapy practitioner, and I'm super excited to share this process with you guys. And I really have enjoyed running group programs in the past couple of months to expose you to a lot of education and information, and then allow each of you to kind of discover your personal journey with functional nutrition and really dive deep into the pillars that help really sustain overall health and wellness for long term. So not quick fix, but we'll really talk about how to implement these strategies into your day-to-day life for the future. And each week you will see on the membership site that I've created or will be creating a meal plan. And the meal plan will be an opportunity for you to try new recipes, to work with meal prepping, will be an opportunity to look into the different foods that we've talked about and the different topics that we've talked about each week, and then understanding that there is no right or wrong way to necessarily eat, but that, when you expose yourself to a variety of nutrients, you may find one way works better for you than another. And, as we go out through the weeks, focusing on specifically digestion, if you follow just the gut healing meal plan for this week, you may notice and see a lot of your symptoms begin to alleviate or shift. You may notice it doesn't work for you. And so these are just things that you will get to play around with, especially as we go throughout the course of the next 4 weeks. You'll be exposed to many, many different recipes. And so I'm excited for that aspect for you guys. And then on the membership site as well, there is a little handout that goes along with each week. And that's really just so that you can take notes as we go along. What I think of those handouts to be are really highlighted points. That way you have, takeaways from these long hour conversations and things to focus on. You could put them on your refrigerator, just carry them around with you, whatever you think is most useful, but especially if something is pertaining specifically to whatever situation you find yourself in. Depending on what your health goal is, 1 week may really speak to you, and that way you have some information to really hold on to that's tangible. And then you'll see a few handouts up there, and we'll work in some other things. All right, well, it's 12:05 and it doesn't look like anyone is on the live call, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing with you information about how to really optimize digestion. And just for the future, so these live calls are a little bit different than the webinar. If you tuned into that, the webinar was me sharing a lot of information and just speaking the whole time, and the live calls are really meant to be interactive. And so hopefully, next week and the following weeks, we'll get some of you on here to really talk about your experience, share what's happening, and really, use this as an opportunity to look specifically into what's happening in your body and not just kind of the general information. But with that being said, I'll go ahead and dive into the topic of optimizing digestion. And I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can see some of these slides, especially because you are not on live. So here we go. All right. Hopefully you are seeing this week 1 Optimizing Digestion screen as you're watching from home. So here we go. So the gut microbiome, and I'm starting here because I want you to get a good understanding of just some terms that I may say, and also what is the gut microbiome if you're not familiar. And so really our gut, our digestive system, houses trillions and trillions of cells, okay? And our goal is to work towards having the beneficial cells, beneficial bacteria, overcrowd those not so good guys, so the not beneficial bacteria, okay? And in order to balance our microbiome, we need to do a lot of work around our intake to optimize digestion, because when digestion is not happening properly, we end up having an overflow of those bad bugs, which leads to a whole host of issues. And so something that's really important to know is that over 80% of disease starts in the gut. And because over 80% of our immune system cells live in our gut, we can become quickly, either healthy or not so healthy, depending on what's happening in your gut microbiome. And so when we focus on, like I said, optimizing digestion, we can really work to avoid gut inflammation, and we can make sure that we're absorbing nutrients and utilizing nutrients and letting go of toxic waste regularly. So you often, I'm sure you've heard, you are what you eat, and taking that one step further, you really are what you eat, digest, and absorb. And so it's super, super important to optimize the absorption and digestion capacity. That way your body can really feel healthy and exuberate this feeling of wellness. So I'm just making sure that this is screen sharing, but I believe it is. Yeah. So the microbiome and our immune system. So gut bacteria generates nutrients for absorption via the bowel wall, okay? And so things like the B vitamin family, vitamin K, and short chain fatty acids, specifically those short chain fats, are fed by prebiotics that live in our gut. And the end goal is to have those prebiotics be really plentiful. That way they can feed the probiotics. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically what I said in the beginning was we really need to have the good bacteria overwhelm and overcrowd the bad, right? And so we need to take in good bacteria and then also work to eradicate the bad bacteria. And I know some of you were really interested in the webinar when I was talking about SIBO, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, and feeling like you may have some symptoms arising in your day-to-day that could indicate a balance of overgrowth of bad bacteria. And that's what SIBO is, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And so why I'm connecting this so much to the immune system is because really, the gut and the immune system act as one, okay? Because 80% of immune system cells live in the GI tract. And so if the immune system is compromised, we run into a situation where our neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine are compromised, resulting in altered brain function, which connects to many, many other neurological issues that we tend to see arising with a not so healthy gut microbiome. If the immune system is also compromised, we'll be unable to remove chemicals from the body as regularly. And so this could lead to autoimmunity, as chemicals can attach to body cells and kind of leak into the bloodstream. And then our antibodies start attacking our own cells. And so it's a chain reaction that happens fairly quickly if we're running into a unhealthy gut bacteria or a compromised immune system. And then looking at the other side, so good bugs in the healthy immune system aid in the production of lymphocytes and immunoglobulins, which stimulate healthy immune system. And if this function is not happening, the immune system becomes even weaker. So it's a reason why you hear us talk so much about the good bugs and the probiotics, and not those not only affecting, just your digestion and your gut, but also your immune system and your ability to then fight off and ward off all sorts of diseases and things like that. And then with a compromised immune system, the opportunist bacteria really overcrowd the beneficial bugs, causing toxic substances to have a negative effect on both the digestive and immune system. So a lot of connection between that microbiome and your immune system, and especially good to have an awareness around this as we lead into fall and we're exposed to more germs, whether you have children or not. There's a lot of sickness that tends to go around. People call it cold season, which to me is just funny because it can be fairly preventable. Oops. Hi, Ellie, welcome. Ellie, are you able to hear me? All right, well, I think some people are slowly joining on, but I'll continue, and feel free to write in the chat box if you can hear me, or of course let me know if you can't hear me. And hopefully all is well. So, oops, let's go back to my screen share. Alrighty. So I'm going to continue on here. And so you can read this, you can read this slide here, feel free. The only things I kind of didn't really talk about are just the fact that our microbiome has such a strong effect on all aspects of our body. So we're going to look at poop, and we're going to talk about poop in a little bit. So eczema, psoriasis, the skin conditions that are connected to microbiome through your immune system, and then of course brain function, like I mentioned. So I'm going to transition a little bit and talk about 3 things that are really important to make sure that you have healthy gut microbiome. And so I think I just instilled to you how important it is that, you have a healthy beneficial bacteria and microbiome living inside of you. And of course that your immune system is so directly connected to your microbiome. And then let's talk a little bit about how to optimize digestion by making sure that you have stomach acid, digestive enzymes, as well as are sufficient pro and prebiotics. And so hydrochloric acid, which is stomach acid, really supports the viscosity and durability of your stomach lining by, when you are chewing food, you need the stomach acid in order to coat the lining, in order for you to then take in and absorb those nutrients. And it's actually one of the most important fluids in the body, which is found in the stomach. And unfortunately, as we age, our natural production of stomach acid decreases. And if we don't have enough stomach acid, we can see a lot of problems such as skin conditions, including acne and rosacea, and things like mineral deficiencies, as well as autoimmune reactions. And so, sorry, just figuring out my screen. There we go. And so we want to make sure that the stomach actually has a pretty acidic environment in order to digest certain foods, specifically protein, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But because hydrochloric acid has a low pH, we want to make sure that we're eating in a way to help neutralize and make sure that our pH in our body stays around neutral. And it can be kind of counterproductive in your mind when you think about whether you're eating acid-forming or neutralizing foods. But what we're working towards is that balance. And you might hear, oh, we want to keep our body in alkaline, we want to be alkalized all the time. As true as that is for many reasons, the stomach needs to be slightly acidic in order for this digestive process to happen. And low stomach acid is called low stomach acid, often leads to conditions that we associate with having too much acid. And those things being gas, bloating, heartburn, acid reflux, even candida overgrowth in the gut, and trouble digesting protein. And so often when you feel that little bit of acid reflux or you have some of these symptoms, people will think, oh, I have too much acid in my body. I should take some sort of an over-the-counter drug to decrease that acid. And unfortunately, it's kind of skewed the way that we're trained to look at that. And so if you're experiencing some of those symptoms, like I just said, the gas, bloating, heartburn, acid reflux, you may want to actually look at how to support increasing your stomach acid to see if some of these symptoms decrease. And hypochlorhydria is just the term that we use for people that suffer from too little stomach acid. So you may want to write that down. It's a good thing to know. That way, if you're running into or experiencing any of these symptoms, you can kind of be in exploration of that. And so just sharing with you then ways to help support stomach acid production. You want to make sure that you're really chewing your food thoroughly to let your body know that food is coming in and to start the release of that stomach acid. And then another opportunity to look into is supplementing with apple cider vinegar or, just a squeeze of lemon in water before each meal. And then if you feel like you suffer from a lot of acid reflux or you're confused by all of this information because you thought you had too much stomach acid, you might want to look into healing some of the tissue in the esophagus. And so things to look for in that realm could be slippery elm, aloe vera, marshmallow root, and DGL, which are deglycerized licorice. And you can find those all over the counter. I'm happy to work with anyone if you're interested in supplementation. But just so that you can definitely have an awareness around making sure that you actually do have enough stomach acid to support and optimize your digestion. And then next, looking at digestive enzymes. And so digestive enzymes really break food down into absorbable units. And, it's not like we eat that broccoli and it just travels through our bloodstream, right? It needs to be broken down and really utilized in a way in these tiny chemical structures for the body then to absorb. Digestive enzymes are really, really helpful in helping to heal leaky gut by taking stress off the GI tract. So whether or not you really have issues digesting certain foods or can pinpoint what those foods may be, by you taking or supplementing with some digestive enzymes gives your body a little bit of ease in the ability to then soothe your GI tract. And digestive enzymes really help by breaking down more difficult foods. So when looking at protein and fats, those that are complex structures, digestive enzymes really work to pull and then utilize departing those nutrients from their core structure, allowing your body to take them in. And what we're seeing so often now is proteins such as gluten, casein, lactose, those things being really difficult for people to digest. And that's likely because there's already inflammation in their GI tract, but supporting with digestive enzymes gives their body the ability to maybe take those in and understand if they actually have an intolerance or a sensitivity to them, or whether their body's just not producing enough digestive enzymes to actually break those down. And then you can see some of the other reasons on the screen why, digestive enzymes are supportive. So improve symptoms of acid reflux and IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, if you're curious about that, enhances nutrition absorption and prevents nutrition deficiency. And then also counteracts enzyme inhibitors such as phytates, and those are found in foods like nuts, grains, eggs, seeds, legumes. And so some of our plant-based foods actually have anti-nutrients in them to protect them from like predators outside, if you will. And one of the reasons why you hear people talk about soaking and sprouting some of these foods is because the phytates and oxalates that are found in nuts and grains and seeds are there to protect the internal part of the structure of that plant, However, if we don't have enough digestive enzymes and enough hydrochloric acid in our bodies, we have a difficult time digesting those as well, which can lead to the gas, the bloating, some of those other GI symptoms that we sometimes experience. And let me see if I have any other notes I wanted to share with you. I think the biggest thing to notice is just if you have, gastrointestinal complaints, like stomach distension or direct diarrhea or flatulence, so gas, kind of indigestion right after eating a meal, we may want to look into digestive enzymes for you, whether that be working to naturally increase your digestive enzyme capacity or doing a little bit of supplementation to see if that creates a shift for you. And then moving into our third must-have to optimize digestion, probiotics and prebiotics. And so I've listed here just some food sources for you to look into, but we have yogurt and kefir, so fermented dairy products, kimchi, sauerkraut, other fermented veggies, and then of course kombucha. And then looking at prebiotics foods, so raw garlic, raw or cooked onions, raw asparagus, leeks, underripe bananas. So if you can tolerate your bananas a little bit of green, those have a lot of prebiotic fiber in them. Jicama, chicory root, dandelion greens, and Jerusalem artichokes are some of my favorite. And I guess looking into why you may want to take a probiotic supplement, and I'm going to go in that direction because this is something that people ask for a lot, right? One thing, just when to take it. I always recommend taking it in the evening when your system is actually resting and you have more time to relax and let the bacteria take root in your gut and you're not stressed and running around throughout the day. The other thing that I always like to bring up is that we don't know exactly what's happening in our individual gut microbiome in terms of what different bacteria we each have. And so if you're interested in supplementation, you may need to try a few different brands to see if you notice alleviation of symptoms or if you notice a difference in your body. Like there's just not one fits all. I have, a supplement company that I work with that has many different strands of bacteria, ensures that the bacteria takes root in your stomach and is not destroyed by the digestive process and by the acidic environment of that stomach acid. So there are a lot of things to look into. But I personally feel like your best option is to eat at least 2 sources of probiotic foods each day to get that healthy gut bacteria to take root in your stomach. And again, if you are wanting to supplement, give yourself at least 30 days. A lot of people will say, oh, I'm not noticing a difference. And, things take a long time to shift in our bodies. In the supplementation world, and you really have to do the process of tuning in, of probably food journaling and making sure that you're really looking at what symptoms you're experiencing and noticing if you're seeing differences if you do choose the supplementation route. And then last not least, on the supplements, make sure that you're finding one without fillers. And so there's often dairy, gluten, soy, starches, things like that added into a lot of supplements, and that's why I can be really weary about supplementation in general. And so if you're thinking, oh, you know what, I actually really want to work on my gut microbiome, I'm curious about a high quality probiotic supplement, send me a little note and let me know, and I can send you some options, because if you are going to supplement, it's really important that you have a high quality supplement option. And then switching to prebiotics for a little bit. And so you don't hear about prebiotics quite as often as I think probiotics are out in the general realm so much more, but prebiotics are substances that are fermented by the beneficial bacteria in the gut and are used as a fuel source to help enhance the gut flora, the overall gut flora, right? So in the beginning, when we talked about what the microbiome is, we need those prebiotics just as much as we need probiotics in order for the whole gut flora to really flourish. And they are live organisms, just like the probiotics, and they really help give the host, so give us, an immense sensation, an immense improved function of health directly connected to our immune system and our brain function. And so I talked a lot about the immune system in the beginning of this, in the beginning of the call, because the brain and the immune system are so directly connected. And so as we move and talk about optimizing digestion, you'll hear me come back to not only immunity, but also brain function. And so when I briefly mentioned those hormones and the serotonin, the dopamine, the connection that we feel in our brain when we have a happy, healthy ecosystem in our gut is so strong. And then to the contrary, can have a really negative effect on our brain if we have not so healthy pre and probiotic function happening in our gut microbiome. And what's interesting about prebiotics is that as they make their way through our stomachs, they don't get broken down by the digestive enzymes and the gastric, the hydrochloric acid that I just talked about. So they bring about the positive effects because they stay intact and become that food. And so as you can see, the prebiotic foods that I talked about, they all contain fiber component, right? And so we need that food and that fuel, that undigested stuff, to take root in our gut in order to allow those the sources of probiotics to really feed off of and flourish in our guts. And pro and prebiotics really work hand in hand together. They play a fundamental role in creating overall health and really just making sure that the beneficial bacteria is overcrowding the negative bacteria. And as I say that, I'm thinking like, oh, why is there negative bacteria? And it's just the balance of our system, right? Like there's no way that we're going to eat in a way or live in an environment that provides no toxins and no, negative really substances in our body. And that's the reality of the situation. And I don't think it's fair to say, oh, work to only, eat these probiotic foods, only, prebiotics. But what happens is that when you eat as many as you can, of these sources of pro and prebiotics food, you have a much better chance of creating that really nice balanced ecosystem. Ellie, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
Oh, perfect. Okay. You're just muted. Do you have any questions at all so far? I know I've been rambling a lot.
Oh, no, you're doing perfect. I'm just taking it in while I work.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty. So I want to break down digestive enzymes just a little bit more for you guys, because we're going to talk now kind of shifting into the functionality of the different digestive enzymes. And so sharing with you here lipase, protease, and amylase, which are the enzymes that break down the different macronutrients. And so I guess to go back, kind of where these enzymes are stored are in our pancreas, okay? And a normal functioning pancreas secretes about 8 cups of pancreatic juice into the small intestine every day. And the fluid contains all of these digestive enzymes. And so like I said, a few slides back, if you feel like for some reason you are not producing all of the digestive enzymes that you think would help soothe your digestive system, we can look at what's happening in your pancreas and look at that connection there. Let's just start with lipase. And so lipase works with bile from the liver to break down fat molecules so they can be absorbed and used by the body. And a shortage of lipase in the body may lead to lack of needed fats and fat-soluble vitamins that are absorbed. And so you may start to see some symptoms, and you might think, wait, I eat a lot of high-quality fats. But we have to look at the absorption of those fats, and that leads us to lipase. So looking at protease now, proteases break down proteins. And they really help keep the intestines free of parasites such as bacteria and yeasts, okay? And what happens when proteins are not properly digested is they actually cause a lot of putrefaction in our GI tract, and that leads to the bacteria and the parasites and the yeast building. And so why we want to make sure we have a lot of these protease digestive enzymes is to make sure that we don't run into that situation. And so shortage, as I just said, would then lead to sometimes allergies or the formation of toxic substances in the body due to the incomplete digestion of proteins. And so if we have the toxic waste of protein sitting in our bodies for too long, they can start to leak into our bloodstream, and our bloodstream can kind of start to create these antibodies against ourselves, forming this toxic relationship. And then, of course, we can also see an increased risk for just intestinal infections if we're not digesting our protein properly. And then looking into amylase, breaks down carbohydrates, so starches, into sugars, which are most easily absorbed by the body. And this enzyme is found in saliva, so starts in our mouth, the digestion of carbohydrates. And really looking at shortages here of amylase, we often see just diarrhea due to the effects of undigested starch in the colon. So too much starch happening there, not being digested. So if you have common, or if you are finding yourself having diarrhea more often than you think you probably should, something to look at is your digestion of carbohydrates and starches. And so now that we understand what and why digestive enzymes are important, let's just look at the digestion of the various macronutrients. And so you can see here, protein digestion has 5 steps. So mastication is the chewing process, so starts in our mouth. And as we start chewing, our food combines with saliva and breaks down into smaller particles. And the surface area of the food really multiplies as these pieces come together and become smaller and smaller, providing more access for the enzyme reactions to happen, and providing more of that digestive process in order to reduce the protein into even smaller molecules. So really important to really, really chew because protein structures are so large. And then as protein moves down into the stomach is where our hydrochloric acid resides. And so when the protein meets the hydrochloric acid, we start to digest and break down those larger molecules of protein. And protein foods really remain in the stomach for 2 to 6 hours in order for this process to work. So that's a pretty long time. One of the reasons why protein keeps us full for so many reasons. One of the reasons also why, though, sometimes people say protein sits really heavy in their stomach. So you can kind of look at both sides of that, maybe one a pro, maybe one a con. And then enzymes, which that's a little misspelling on my slide. Sorry about that, guys. And the stomach secretes enzymes, right? The protease that I just talked about, and really removes the bonds that hold together the long chains of amino acids that make up protein. And next week, when we talk about eating for energy, we'll talk about the various macronutrients a little bit more, but proteins break down into chains of amino acids, and some are long, some are short, some are medium length. And so what the proteases do in the stomach in this instant is break down those longer chains in order to make them into very small units. And then in the pancreas, we see the pancreas secreting trypsin, which is another digestive enzyme, into the small intestine. And the protein molecules are reduced in size even more here until they can pass through the intestinal wall. And when they pass through the intestinal wall is when they actually enter the bloodstream, giving us the energy and giving our body the nutrients. And so once the protein is really in their smallest components, they're ready to go into the bloodstream. And the intestinal wall, you might hear me talk about a little bit more later, but consists of like these little folds of villi, and they have finger-like projections on them. So if you can imagine like little hairs called microvilli that increase in the absorption areas in order to pull the amino acids into the circulatory, into the bloodstream, okay? So into those capillaries. And so it's kind of like we have these folds, it actually kind of looks like this, if you will, like two hands kind of stacked on top of each other, continuously folding. And then you have those little microvilli projections that draw those small amino acids in and then absorb through the bloodstream. So as you can see, the process of mastication, then moving into the stomach with the digestive enzymes, using the work of the pancreas, and then finally the protein gets into the bloodstream. So a pretty lengthy process for protein digestion. And again, why you can hopefully see why having both hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes is so important for that process. And then looking at fat digestion. So in fat, we mainly look at the mouth, what's happening in the mouth, the stomach, and again, the small intestine. And so, you know, similar to protein and really like all of our foods, the digestion process really starts in the mouth when you start chewing your food and breaking it down into the smaller pieces. Then we see the esophagus really be involved in fat because of the muscle contractions that are needed to really move food as fat being such an intense molecule down the esophagus and into the stomach. So making sure that you're really chewing, and then we need a lot of peristalsis, we need a lot of esophagus contraction and involvement in order to help us process fats and move down the fats into our stomach. And when we're looking at our stomach in terms of fat digestion, we're coming back to the lipase, okay? And so we are, though, really making sure that we have enough acid and enough enzymes here in order to break those fats into their fatty acid components. So similar to protein, having large chain of amino acids, fats are intense molecules that need to be broken down into fatty acids. And then once they reach the small intestine, so moving out of the stomach, again, the small intestine is really where the absorption happens for the digestion of fat. So the chyme, which is that the ball basically of food that is the fat containing with all of the stomach acids, okay, moves into the small intestines. We get hormones to signal to the gallbladder to really contract. And these contractions push the bile then, which is made in the liver, out of the gallbladder into the small intestine. And so we actually don't get that signaling process to happen until the fat food reaches our small intestine. But it's so important that we have action happening in our liver and in our gallbladder in order to digest fats. And then at the same time, the pancreas, which is located just under the stomach, right? I just talked about the pancreas, is going to start to release the lipases in order to help further break down the fat molecules that are now in your small intestine. So fat is working a little bit different than protein in the sense that protein really gets broken down in the stomach, whereas fat, most of the digestion and absorption actually happens in the small intestine. And now taking a look into carbohydrate digestion. And so, you know, kind of similar processes or similar organs involved here. We're going to talk about the mouth, the stomach, the small intestine, the pancreas, and then also the large intestine, which is the colon. And so carbohydrate digestion specifically really begins in the mouth because saliva is actually where the amylase is present. And so we have our lipase and our proteases that digest protein and fat secreting from the pancreas and working their way into the stomach and small intestine. But carbohydrate saliva includes that amylase that we see that really starts the digestion of carbohydrates right in the mouth. I need to take a sip of water. So while you start chewing your carbohydrates in your mouth, we get this little release of enzyme, of amylase enzymes, and they start breaking down the saccharides, which are the large molecules of carbohydrates or starches. And then as we begin to swallow our food in the stomach, we see the food really then form this ball basically and really mix with more amylase and other salivary juices that are present in the stomach. And when the mixture enters the stomach, that's where it's known as chyme. And that's what I just said about the fat. So carbohydrates and fat form this bolus, basically this ball of food called chyme. And there's no further digestion of chyme for carbohydrate. So the stomach produces acid, which destroys the bacteria and the food stops the action of the salivary amylase. And so carbohydrate digestion ends right there in the stomach. With that being said, of course, the food then is broken down into its smallest molecules. It still needs to go through the process of absorption. And so after being in the stomach, the chyme goes into the small intestine. The chains of sugars may continue to reduce if they were larger structures and more complex carbohydrates. And then that process is moved into the large intestine. And so with both protein and fat, you saw the absorption happening via the small intestine and the bowel wall and the small intestinal wall, where carbohydrates that are not digested by the small intestine may reach the colon fully intact. And those specific carbohydrates are ones that include fiber. And so fiber is not fully digested by the small intestine. That was a little bit of a confusing roundabout to get there. So I'm just going to rephrase that. So some carbohydrate is digested throughout the process of entering the small intestine, but if there's a fiber component to it, that's not digested until we get to the large intestine, which is the colon. And if it's undigestible fiber, it's there where it becomes that beneficial food for the probiotics, okay? And so fiber, right, then can also be excreted with feces and eliminated, which is why fiber is so helpful in so many different ways, and we'll talk about this much more next week. But just things to look at here are making sure you understand that some carbohydrate digestion happens in the small intestine. If there's a fiber component to those carbohydrates, they won't be digested until they reach the colon, and there may become fermented prebiotic fiber for those probiotics, or may then be excreted, helping you with your bowel movements. All right, so I added this little note here because, as I just shared, a lot of information regarding the different digestive processes of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And as much as we understand we need to have pro and prebiotics, we need to have a variety of digestive enzymes, and we need to have strong stomach acid. With all that being said, there are food combining rules that we could look at to further enhance digestion. And so some people focus on this a lot. Some people find that it doesn't make that big of a difference. And what I tend to see with myself, with clients, is that it really depends on your specific digestive fire. So it depends on if you have bacteria overgrowth. It depends on if you have an autoimmune disease and you have a little bit more inflammation in your system. It depends on the integrity of your gut lining. And then, of course, depends on the amount of digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid and pro and prebiotics that you have currently. And so what's funny about these rules, and I'll just read them to you in a moment, is that a lot of common meals that we tend to eat are not applicable to these food combining rules. And so that's why a lot of people are like, what? I eat that all the time. Why would that process not work properly? And really, it's just going back to understanding the process of protein, fat, and carbohydrate digestion, and that each of those processes happens a little bit differently. And so when we have carbohydrates that start digesting in the mouth and digest really quickly and end in the small, in the stomach, you can understand that then if you eat those with protein, which takes 4 to 6 hours to digest, we might end up with a little kind of sludge happening and a little bit of the process not happening so smoothly because they're happening at such rapidly different paces. And so with that being said, I'll read these rules to you in case you're not looking and can't see my screen. So starches do mix with vegetables, right? And we think most vegetables generally are carbohydrate, are starchy themselves. Proteins do mix with vegetables as well. Proteins and starches do not mix. And so I guess going back, yes, I just said vegetables are starchy and they're a carbohydrate, so they technically are starchy, but proteins and starches don't mix in the sense that really complex starchy foods like your grains, your legumes, really starchy potatoes and things like that, those are not going to mix with protein as well because of the different processes, especially because when we have all of that fiber component that's trying to get down into your large intestine and then being backed and stopped by the protein taking so long to digest, we can often see a lot of kind of inflammation or distension and bloating and gas happening when people are eating a lot of foods combining proteins and starches at the exact same time. Different proteins do not mix. This is one that I don't tend to see affect me too often, but essentially just that because we need so much protease to digest protein, if we're mixing a lot of different protein sources that have a lot of different combinations of amino acids, we need a lot of digestive capacity in order to break all of those down properly. And then fats do not pair well with protein, so pair moderately. Again, just because protein digestion takes so long and uses different digestive enzymes than your fat digestion, you can see a little bit of often kind of like your body hitting a wall with digestion. And when you're eating both fat and heavy protein meal at the same time is really when people kind of complain of that heaviness feeling and the sluggishness feeling of eating such a heavy meal. Fats do mix with starches, so you can see that the quick starch digestion and then the process of digesting fats, that works fine together. Fruits should be eaten on an empty stomach is one of those sayings because fruits digest so quickly and have a lot of digestive capacity themselves because of the seeds that they contain. You can kind of eat a fruit and pass it through your body fairly quickly so it doesn't affect other things. So it's recommended to eat those on an empty stomach. Then there's the other side of that where I have a strong belief that if we're just eating fruit without any protein or fat, we're getting a higher influx of glucose into our system, so it could affect our blood sugar. So it depends on what your health goals are around all of these food combining rules, right? Because some of them may seem like, oh, that might make a big difference. And some of them may be like, well, listen, if I just eat fruit on an empty stomach all the time, I'm going to have, a crash in 20 minutes and want more fruit. So you have to kind of just tune in to where your body is at the present moment and understand what it's looking for when exploring these food combining rules. All right, and then talking a little bit about elimination. And so I have some tools here to support bowel transit time. My biggest pull with elimination is tracking. And that may seem funny to have the desire to really understand, track, record your bowel movements, but also like looking in the toilet after you go and just seeing if there are undigested food particles, if there are constantly loose stools, if there's any oily substances in your stools that might let you know you're not digesting fat properly. And I am a firm believer that elimination is one of the largest telltale signs to what's happening in our gut. And you heard me mention earlier, we don't actually know, and it's really, really hard to understand the exact levels of microorganisms that live inside of you specifically. And so without like extensive stool testing and this and that, knowing that just by taking that gaze at your bowels can give you a lot of information. And then in order to support and increase bowel transit time, that's a focus of mine because ideally we want to be going to the bathroom 3 times a day, assuming you're eating 3 meals a day. And why elimination is so important is because if you have undigested food particles that are living in your system for too long, they become extremely toxic byproducts that can then enter back into your bloodstream and lead to a lot of inflammation. And we know that when there's inflammation in the gut lining, it affects our immune system so drastically much. And so I just encourage you, if you are not going to the bathroom, pooping 3 times a day, to start exploring the amount of fiber that you're taking in, to make sure that you're drinking enough water and liquids to really help support and lubricate your whole GI system. And then, of course, to look into your digestive enzymes. Let me know if you're interested in supplementing, or let me know if you're like, this is the first time I've heard of digestive enzymes. I need to understand if I'm digesting my food at all, especially if you're seeing particles of food in your stools. We really need to talk about this. Making sure that you have good bacteria. So those probiotics that I talked about will help with your bowel transit time. And then, of course, exercise. And this doesn't have to be running 10 miles or CrossFit or anything high intensity, but like a simple walk, 3 times a day, just moving your body and getting those juices, getting everything flowing, stimulating the movement in your internal organs in order for your body to let it know that it's safe to eliminate. And then with that being said, as I just said the word safe, it makes me think of I just wanted to pause for a minute to make sure that I'm formulating my words right, but really made me think of making sure that you are aware of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the place of rest and digest. So if you are someone who is constantly stressed out and really high energy, go, 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 intense exercise, like intense job, intense family life, your body doesn't feel safe in a place that it can actually let go and eliminate. So giving yourself the time, giving yourself a few breaths, like giving yourself the space to go into the bathroom and let yourself eliminate is really, really important. And I know, you're not sitting at home all day just waiting for this to happen, and you're often on the go and at work and maybe in uncomfortable situations, but I cannot really stress enough how important it is to be comfortable around going to the bathroom and to letting the movements happen in order to release toxic waste from your system, and making sure that you're letting go and getting rid of what's no longer serving your body and not absorbing it back into your bloodstream, really. And just one quick thing to share with you, because I have a lot of people that are like, well, I suffer from both constipation and diarrhea and aren't sure what the connection there is. And so basically, if you develop impacted feces on the wall of the colon, that's considered constipation, right? So maybe not enough liquid, like not enough fiber, adrenal fatigue, sluggish liver and gallbladder, sluggish thyroid. A lot of things can lead to that. But basically, the impacted feces on the wall of your colon is constipation. And that means that the colon cannot absorb water, right? So then when watery material passes through the lumen in your colon, it passes right out of the body and appears as diarrhea. However, you're really experiencing the toxic effects of constipation. And so we want to make sure that you're moving the bacteria and moving your bowels out of your system so you don't get that impacted feces. Because what happens too when your feces starts impacting, right, then as the water material comes in, you're not even able to absorb any of that, and it's just passing right out of your system, which then can lead to dehydration and lack of absorption of nutrients. And so they have a really strong effect. But know that if you chronically have diarrhea, it's actually likely an effect of constipation. So, and then, as I was just getting into the idea of your parasympathetic nervous system, I just want to recognize that there's about 6 minutes left, and I want to make sure that I finish on time, because I know that an hour is a long time to listen to so much information. But I'm going to move into my last few suggestions on how to help optimize your digestive system. And so we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but making sure that your body's in its parasympathetic nervous system is so important. And one of the ways to do that in the beginning of eating a meal is to really make sure that you're chewing your food, right? So as saliva breaks down the food and the enzymatic reactions start to happen, we prime our body to help our system absorb and to relax the inner workings of our GI system. if we don't involve that chewing process, right, it puts a lot on our bellies and our guts, intestines, our stomach, and it's just like ultimately too much for them. And that's where we see a lot of the gassiness, the, whether it be the diarrhea or the constipation, because everything's being jammed into your stomach before the process really starts in the mouth. And as you saw when I talked about both protein, fat, and carbohydrate digestion, it all starts in our mouth. So if we don't involve the chewing process, right, like there's kind of no hope for what comes down the stream. And so one of the things that I really recommend clients do is if you eat a lot of soups and smoothies, still practice like the chewing motion, that mastication of just clenching your teeth to let your body know that food is coming. And then really working on eating in a calm environment. And so, right, the physical and emotional process that goes into eating can be extreme for some. And it's really, really important that your body feels safe while you're taking in food. And we're going to talk a lot about hormones when we do our bonus section on balancing blood sugar and insulin. But basically, if you're in a calm environment, great, right? Your body's primed for digestion and absorption. If you're in a stressful environment and in that fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system activation, your stress hormones are elevated and all digestive capacity is shut down. So if you're constantly on the go, or if you find yourself eating at work or in the car or running around, like I really just ask you to take a few deep breaths and ask yourself how you can create a more calm environment wherever you may be. So I know that it's not necessarily going to be possible, right, for you to sit down at a dinner table with a candle lit and, in that sort of environment for every single meal, but do what you can to create a more calm environment wherever you may be eating. And like really on the counter side of that, if you're super, super stressed and if you're in an environment that you just do not feel like is safe for you, don't eat at that time. And if you're starving, drink a cup of water or tea or something. But really, really, in order to actually optimize your digestive system, if your stress hormones are really elevated, the ability for your body to absorb any nutrients is just not there. And then, of course, really slow down and be in your body. So I think I kind of just jumped ahead there. But as I was talking about rest and digest and just making sure that your body is primed for absorption, you need to be in a calm environment. You need to be slowing down. You can't be on the go. You can't be expecting your body, these digestive capacities to happen if you're in such a rushed state and if you're kind of living on the outside, right? And this is why the process of food journaling and why I hope this 4-week class will give you a long-term kind of view of creating overall health and wellness, because these tricks and tips are not like crazy out there. It's really just a process of actually tuning in and really being in your body and recognizing what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And then swinging us back to this slide, which is the one that I shared on the webinar that you saw, really understanding food allergies, intolerances, and irritants and what they can lead to. And so I just shared with you what the very important tools are to make sure that you're actually optimizing your digestive system. And if all of those things are in place, there's a much less chance that you'll have allergies or intolerances to foods that are coming in, unless you're eating a lot of junk or ingesting a lot of alcohol, caffeine, sugar, things that really are irritating to the gut lining. But if you make sure that you have optimal digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid, and pro and prebiotics, a lot of the kind of common food allergies and intolerances aren't going to affect your body. However, if you notice those things affecting your body, we need to take a few steps back and correct and look at the symptoms that you're feeling, and then give you an understanding of why those symptoms have caused perhaps a condition that you're suffering from, and then from there, what to do about it. So if you're in that camp and you are like, I definitely have something going on with my digestive system because of these symptoms that I experience, and I don't think it can be optimized by looking at the amount of stomach acid I have, my digestive enzymes, and pro and prebiotics, then we should have a private conversation around what may be happening in your specific body and how we can help to alleviate those symptoms and get you back on track so that your digestive system can really be optimized in order for you to kind of understand the rest of the functional nutrition class. So we are about at our hour mark, and I want to open it up for questions if anyone has any. And then, of course, I want to just put one more note in there about the gut healing meal plan. In that meal plan, you'll see foods that are really supportive to the gut lining. You'll see foods that are supportive to making sure that you are getting pro and prebiotics. And you'll see foods that are easily digested by the body that won't put a lot of strain on your GI tract. Not all of the meals are properly combined because, like I said, a lot of meals that we generally think of in order to balance and create a balanced meal don't follow all of those food combining principles. But I did want to share those principles with you so you understand that there are different ways to look at things and different ways to approach each person as an individual. So you'll see that meal plan, you'll see the guide, the recipes, the shopping lists. Please, let me know as you make those recipes if you like them, if you're noticing a difference in your digestive capacity, if you're not liking them, really if anything's going on. And then, use that little handout as a tool to jot down notes as you listen to the recording and make sure that you kind of have an understanding around why we need protein, carbohydrates, fat, why the digestive capacity for each of those macronutrients is a little bit different, and why making sure that you have all of the digestive enzymes is so important. And then, of course, further understanding those pro and prebiotics, letting me know if you're interested in a supplementation recommendation, and making sure that you actually have enough hydrochloric acid rather than too little, especially if you're experiencing any of the common symptoms that people often associate with having too much acid. All right. Well, I know a few people have to hop off, and I'm really excited for those of you to listen to the recording, and please feel free to keep in touch. Email me over the next week. And if you are one who hasn't submitted your intake form or digestive wellness questionnaire, please feel free to send that to me. You know that next week, one of the bonuses is a private one-on-one for 20 minutes to look at your macronutrient distribution and really understand eating for energy. So I want to make sure that I have your client intake form before that. All right, everyone. I hope you have a super wonderful Thursday, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.